The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. My father, Richard Hammond, 63 years old, lay in a semi-private room at St. Vincent's Medical Center in Tampa, Florida. He was hooked to a ventilator after a massive hemorrhagic stroke. His right side was paralyzed, his speech was garbled, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes I'd known my whole life, were wide open, and they were staring at me. Not with fear, not with love, with calculation. "Sign it," he slurred, pushing a "do not resuscitate" form toward me with his trembling left hand. "No heroics. Too expensive." I thought he was delirious. I was wrong. What followed wasn't a medical tragedy, it was a financial horror story dressed in hospital gowns. And by the time the 72-hour countdown ended, my father hadn't just lost his life support. He'd lost his house, his savings, his reputation, and every single person who ever loved him. All because he tried to pull the plug to save a buck. Part 1. The man who priced his own heartbeat. Growing up Hammond. To understand the nightmare, you have to understand my father. Richard Hammond wasn't poor. He was worth nearly $4.2 million, a mix of real estate, a diversified stock portfolio, and a pension from 30 years as a civil engineer. He drove a 5-year-old Toyota Camry. He wore shirts until they frayed at the cuffs. He clipped coupons for toothpaste. He wasn't cheap. He was pathologically frugal. My mother, Ellen, died from breast cancer in 2018. Her final 3 months in hospice cost $187,000 after insurance. My father paid $43,000 out of pocket. He never forgave her for it. I'm serious. He would mutter, "She should have just let go sooner," at dinner. That was the last Christmas we spent together as a family. After Mom died, Dad became obsessed with exit planning. Not estate planning, exit planning. He wanted to die without costing a dime. He once asked his primary care doctor, "What's the cheapest way to have a heart attack?" The doctor laughed. Dad didn't. The stroke. On a humid Tuesday in September, Dad collapsed at the Publix deli counter. A stranger found him face down next to a display of rotisserie chicken. By the time the ambulance arrived, he'd lost all sensation on his right side. The CT scan showed a hemorrhagic stroke, bleeding in the basal ganglia. Neurosurgery was possible, but not guaranteed. Recovery could take months. Rehab could cost hundreds of thousands. But Dad didn't ask about recovery odds. He asked about cost. "What's the ventilator running per day?" he croaked to the ICU nurse, whose name tag read Debbie, RN. Debbie hesitated. "Sir, let's focus on getting you stable." "No," he insisted. "Give me numbers." She gave him an estimate. $8,400 per day for the ICU bed, ventilator, medications, and monitoring, plus physician fees, plus labs, plus imaging. A full week could easily hit $70,000 before insurance. Dad's eyes lit up, not with fear, but with calculation. "I have a high-deductible plan," he said. "I'm on the hook for $12,000 before coinsurance even kicks in, and then 20% after that." No. He asked for a DNR form. The argument. I arrived from Atlanta that evening. My younger sister, Karen, flew in from Denver. We stood at the foot of his bed, watching him scribble his signature with his non-dominant hand. "Dad, stop!" Karen begged. "You have insurance. You have savings. We can pay the deductible. Just let them treat you." He laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "You think I'm gonna blow $50,000 on a 20% chance I walk again? No, I've done the math." "What math?" I shouted. "You're not an actuary. You're a patient." "Exactly. And patients cost money. Dead people don't." He signed the DNR. He also signed a limited intervention directive. No intubation, no CPR, no dialysis, no feeding tube, nothing but comfort care. The hospital ethics committee was notified. A social worker came to speak with him. He told her, "Unless you're paying my bills, get out." They honored his wishes. Legally, they had no choice. Part 2. The 72-hour countdown begins. Hour 6. The first shock. Within 6 hours of signing the DNR, my father's condition deteriorated. His blood pressure spiked to 210/120. He developed aspiration pneumonia, fluid in his lungs. A respiratory therapist suggested a bronchoscopy. Dad refused. "That's a surgical procedure," he said, "with anesthesia. What's the bill?" The therapist, a young man named Marcus, tried to explain that insurance would cover most of it. Dad cut him off. I said no. That night, I sat in the waiting room and did something I'd never done before. I hacked into his financial accounts. I knew his passwords. He used the same one for everything. Penny Pincher, 1972. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, my father had systematically liquidated almost everything. His brokerage account, $1.2 million to $47,000. His savings, $340,000 to $8,200. His second property, a lake house in Georgia, sold for $690,000 cash. Where did the money go? I traced it to a series of offshore transfers, Cayman Islands, then to a trust in the Isle of Man, then to a cryptocurrency wallet. He wasn't trying to save money on medical bills. He was hiding his assets. Hour 18. The daughter who fought back. I confronted Karen in the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m. "He's moving money offshore," I whispered. "He's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of us inheriting anything." Karen's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, "he's planning to die broke, so we get nothing. He'd rather give it to some crypto scammer than let us have a dime." We cried, then we got angry, then we called a lawyer. Lawrence Larry Dern, a probate and elder law attorney in Tampa, answered at 3 a.m. He later told us he hadn't slept in 30 hours. Thank God for overworked lawyers. Larry explained something we'd never known. In Florida, a DNR doesn't void a will or trust, but if your father deliberately impoverishes himself to avoid medical bills and to disinherit you, that's called fraudulent transfer and undue influence on oneself. You can challenge it. But there was a catch. To challenge it, Dad had to be alive, or we had to have clear evidence of his intent before death. We had the bank records, we had the crypto transfers, we had his own words. Dead people don't cost money. On the hospital's voice recording system, every ICU room is recorded for liability. We had a case, but we had no time. Hour 36. The sisters' betrayal. This is where the story turns from tragic to psychotic. Karen, it turns out, wasn't on my side. She'd flown to Tampa not to save Dad, but to negotiate her piece of the hidden pie. I discovered this when I walked into Dad's room at 6 a.m. and found Karen sitting next to his bed, holding his hand, whispering. They stopped talking the moment I entered. Later that morning, Karen pulled me aside. "He's going to change the beneficiary on the offshore trust to just me if you stop fighting him on the DNR. I stared at her. "You're joking." "I'm being practical," she said. "He's dying anyway. Why should we both lose everything? Let me have this. I'll pay off your student loans." That was the moment I realized the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Karen was my father's true heir, not in money, but in cruelty. I walked out of the hospital. I didn't return for 12 hours. Hour 48. The hospital's intervention. At noon on the second day, the hospital's legal department intervened. They'd reviewed the voice recordings. They'd seen the financial trail I'd shared with Larry. They determined that my father was likely not of sound mind when he signed the DNR, not because of the stroke, but because of his financial paranoia. A court-appointed psychiatrist evaluated him. Dr. Vivian Okonkwo spent 45 minutes asking Dad questions. "Do you know what year it is?" "Yes." "Who is the president?" "Yes." "How much money do you have?" He lied and said $50,000. If you had a chance to live another 10 years, would you pay $100,000 for that chance? He said no. He said he wouldn't pay $10,000. Dr. Okonkwo's conclusion: the patient exhibits capacity for basic decisions but is severely impaired in value-based medical decision-making due to a lifelong personality disorder with paranoid and miserly features. He is unable to weigh risks and benefits appropriately. The hospital revoked the DNR at hour 52. Dad was furious. He tried to rip out his IV. He called me a greedy vulture. He called Karen a traitor. Ironic, given their secret deal. He demanded to be discharged against medical advice, which would have been a death sentence. But then, something unexpected happened. Hour 62. The truth explodes. Larry Dern had been busy. He'd filed an emergency motion in Hillsborough County Probate Court to freeze all of Dad's known assets, including the crypto wallet. The judge granted it at 4 p.m. on day 2. When the hospital's patient advocate read the court order to Dad, his face changed. For the first time, I saw fear, not of death, but of poverty. "You can't do this," he whispered. "That's my money." "No," I said. "It was yours. Now it's evidence." Karen tried to run. She literally stood up, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. A hospital security guard stopped her. Not because she'd done anything illegal yet, but because Larry had also filed a motion to depose her. She was a witness now. She looked at me with pure hatred. "I will never forgive you for this." "Good," I said. "Join the club." Part 3. The Wreckage. Hour 72. The Collapse. At 9 p.m. on day 3, my father suffered a second stroke, this one massive and unsurvivable. Without the DNR in place, the ICU team intubated him, started pressors, and attempted emergency clot retrieval. They succeeded in clearing the clot, but the damage was done. He was brain dead by 11 p.m. The ventilator kept his chest rising and falling, but the EEG was flat. Dr. Okonkwo pronounced him dead at 11:47 p.m. He died exactly as he'd lived, alone in a room full of people who hated him. Aftermath. The ruin. The following 6 months were a legal bloodbath. 1. The offshore trust was invalidated. The court ruled that Dad had transferred assets with the sole intent to defraud legitimate creditors and disinherit his heirs. The crypto was recovered, about $1.9 million after fees. 2. Karen was found to have conspired with Dad to hide assets. She was removed as a beneficiary in order to pay $340,000 in legal fees from her own share of the estate, which she hadn't yet received. She declared bankruptcy. 3. The house in Tampa, Dad's primary residence, had a reverse mortgage he'd taken out secretly. The bank foreclosed. I got nothing from it. 4. Medical bills. The hospital pursued Dad's estate for $487,000. Between insurance and the frozen assets, they took almost everything that wasn't in the crypto wallet. 5. My share. After all legal fees, taxes, and medical bills, I inherited exactly $12,800 and a box of my mother's old jewelry. But that's not the ruin I remember. The ruin I remember is the silence. The silence at Christmas. The silence on birthdays. The silence when I drive past the old house and see a stranger's car in the driveway. My father pulled the plug to save a buck. And in doing so, he pulled the plug on any chance of being remembered as anything other than a cautionary tale. Epilogue. What I learned. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it as a warning. Money is not a legacy. Control is not love. And a DNR is not a financial instrument. If you have a parent who talks about not wanting to be a burden, listen carefully. Are they afraid of pain, or are they afraid of bills? If it's the latter, You need to have the hardest conversation of your life, because what happened to my family can happen to yours. My father spent 63 years accumulating wealth and 72 hours throwing it away. He thought he was being smart. He was just being miserly. And in the end, miserly is just another way of saying empty. Final note. If you or someone you love is considering a DNR for financial reasons, please speak to a hospital social worker, a financial counselor, or therapist. No spreadsheet is worth what I watched my family become.